Oh, hello. I'm just here to put my broom away. Well, since you're here, you can go ahead and put your broom next to mine and come on in, and I'll give you some witchy book recommendations. Come on. Welcome, everybody. Grab yourself a witchy potion, and let's go ahead and get started. So, I'm going to first start with some cozy witchy books, starting out with a couple that you've probably heard of, just to get them out of the way. So we have Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I have not read this series yet, but I adore the movie with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. This is really short. I was surprised because it's less than 300 pages and the font is like huge. So that kind of surprised me. I have a feeling that maybe the movie, they've added a lot to it. But anyways, for those that may not know, this is about two sisters and they live with their aunts, or maybe it's their great aunts. And everybody in the neighborhood think that they are witches. And so growing up, they've had kind of a hard childhood because nobody wanted to be friends with them. People would pick on them and bully them, and they just had a hard time of it. And they were kind of upset with their aunts because they don't make it easy, because they always concoct little potions and do weird, like, witchy type things, which doesn't help their case. So one of the sisters ends up running away and the other sister gets married in order to try and get away from this life. So there is 4 books in the series. So you have Practical Magic, but then you also have Magic Lessons and The Rules of Magic and The Book of Magic. Now there's 2 different ways that you can read this series. You can do it in chronological order, or you can do it in publication order, because they're not the same. Next we have Cackle by Rachel Harrison. And this is about a woman who just went through a bad breakup, but she's very sad and depressed, and she moves to this little town where she meets this woman, I believe her name is Sophie, and they become friends. But as she hangs out with Sophie, she starts to realize that maybe her friend is a witch. So I really enjoyed this one a lot. And then we have The Change by Kristen Miller. And this one's kind of funny because it's called The Change. And it's about these 3 women that are going through the big change, which is menopause. And they're having a bit of a midlife crisis. But then they discover that they have these newfound powers. And so in this city or town that they live in, this teenage girl, her body is found, and they feel like the police didn't do a very good job investigating this murder. And so with their new witchy powers, they're going to take it upon themselves to solve the murder of this teenage girl. And then I have a couple of modern witch stories, starting with Hex by Thomas Oldhoyvelt. And I really love this book. I know it's kind of got mixed reviews, but I personally really liked it. I thought it was very unique and very good. So this is about a town that's kind of off on its own, and it's a very unique little town because if you move there, you can't leave. You are forced to stay in this town because there's a curse upon this town by this witch that's been living in this town since the witch trials in the 1600s, and she just kind of wanders the town, and she just pops up. Like, you'll just come downstairs to eat breakfast and she's just standing in your kitchen. Like, it's so creepy and so weird, and they just kind of are used to it, so they're like, oh, the witch is here, you know, like, and they try to ignore her. But yeah, she just like shows up but you can't tell anybody because they have like this kind of like an NDA, I guess. But you know, there's a understanding in this town that you don't tell anybody about the witch. So the upcoming generation has had enough, you know, and they kind of want to post this to social media and tell people about this witch because they're sick of living their life this way in secrecy and not being able to leave. It had some great commentary in the end, and I just thought it was very unique for a witchy book, and I really enjoyed it. And then this one I just barely recently got in my Book of the Month book box, and that's The Book of Witching by C.J. Cook. And this is about a woman whose daughter and her best friend and her boyfriend went on this hiking trip, but the boyfriend turns up dead, the best friend ends up being missing, and her daughter is found unconscious. So they rush her to the hospital, and when she wakes up, she has no memory of what happened on this hike. She doesn't even know her own name, and she goes by the name of Nyx. And so her mom is trying to find out what happened to her daughter, and she's starting to suspect that it may have been an ancient curse. Next, we have The Witches of Santo Stefano, and this is by Wendy Webb. This is about a woman who was an investigative journalist, and she discovers that her husband was having an affair. And so to kind of get away from all that, she starts investigating her own family tree and her own family, because there was a beloved great-grandfather that everybody loved, and she discovered that he might not even be real. So she starts investigating her own family, her own ancestors, and she discovers some witchy family secrets. And in the course of her investigation, she also stumbles upon an old spell book. So I haven't read this one, but I think it sounds really good, and I enjoy Wendy Webb, and I think there's only been like one book of hers that I didn't really like. I found it pretty boring, but for the most part, everything I've read from Wendy Webb I've enjoyed. And then I have two books that are a bit more like haunted house witchy books. First, I have The Hanging Tree by Irina Shapiro, and this is about a woman who... Hi, puppy! My dog came and visited me. Hi, Dad! Too bad you can't really see her. But anyway, so this is about a woman who wants to spend the summer doing research, because she goes to Harvard and she needs to do some research for her thesis. But then her mom says that she needs to help her this summer in clearing out her grandmother's house near Salem, because it needs to be sold. And so she reluctantly goes to this house of her grandmother's to clear it out, and she suspects that a witch that was hanged during the Salem witch trials may be inhabiting this house. And so she starts to investigate a little bit what happened. And then she starts to believe that what the history books say about this woman or the spirit of this witch is not accurate, that something else happened, and she's bound and determined to figure out what was the true cause of this woman's death. And then we have The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas, and this is a little bit different because the witch in this book is actually a man. He's a priest. And so this woman, she moves into this house, her new husband, and she suspects that it's haunted. And so she enlists the local priest to come help her. And he has, his spiritual side, which isn't really working. And so he's like, well, I am actually a witch too. Let's try some of those skills to see if it helps. So it's a little bit different. And then I have some books that are historical fiction witchy books. We have Wayward by Amelia Hart. So this is told in 3 different timelines. So we have a modern woman from 2019 who inherits this old cottage called Wayward Cottage. And then we have a perspective from somebody living in the 1600s during the witch trials. And then we have another woman living during World War II. And so each woman has their own experience being a woman during that time period. So I'm not exactly sure where the witchy elements come in. I haven't read this one, but I'm guessing a lot of it will stem from the perspective in the 1600s. And, the woman living in that cottage, because I think she's living in the same cottage that the woman from the 1600s lived in. Anyways, it sounds good. I've heard nothing but good reviews on this one, so I'm excited to eventually get to it. And then we have the Physic book of Deliverance Dane. And this is about a woman, again, who inherits a house that may have been the house of a witch living in the 1600s. And she starts to piece together secrets and the life of this woman called Deliverance Dane. Actually, this is the one that was going to Harvard and doing her doctoral thesis. So discount what I said about that other book. It's actually this one. But anyways, so This one wasn't my favorite. I remember it being kind of slow and boring, but at the same time, I read it as a teenager, and so I think I need to do a reread because I may not have the same mindset that I do as an adult, and I might not have understood everything that was going on. I don't know. I just think it's a really cool looking book, and she discovers this old skeleton key, and it's got like these letters, and it's just a really pretty book, and so I kind of want to give it another try because I should probably just get rid of this if I don't like it. But I feel like I would like it more as an adult because it sounds like it has all the elements that I would love. So I want to try it again. If you have read this book, let me know if you enjoyed it. And then we have The Manning Tree Witches by A.K. Blakemore. And this is about a group of women living, I think, in the 1600s. Yeah, 1643. So these women were living with the Puritans. But because of a lot of wars with the Indians and stuff, their men have been decimated. And so it's mostly just a town of women. So they're trying to figure out what life looks like without all their men. And then a guy dressed all in black, calling himself what does he call himself? The Witchfinder General. He strolls into town and pretty much tells these women, what have you girls been doing here without your men, without any supervision? And so he's kind of investigating to see how these women have been living their lives. So this is another one that I haven't read yet, but I'm very much looking forward to. And then we have Hour of the Witch, and I'm not going to attempt to say this name, Chris something something something, because I have no idea. You can see for yourself what it is, because I will butcher it. So anyways, so again, this is also a historical fiction about this Puritan woman, and she is the second wife of this man who is very abusive and cruel and violent towards her. And he actually ends up stabbing her hand with a pitchfork, and so she's decided she's had enough and she's tried to figure out how she can divorce this man and get away from him. But then different things start to go down, because she can't be untethered from a man, like, shocking, and she uses herbs and stuff to help this young boy who ends up dying. And so now she's in danger of becoming the next victim of the witch trials and being hanged for being a witch. And then we have Slewfoot by Brom. I'm sure you guys have already seen and heard about this book, but I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite witch stories of all time. Very feminist, very, Puritan witch trial stuff, but there was one aspect of it that I thought was a little bit weird that I had to get used to. I won't tell you what that is if you haven't read it, but it has a lot of like pagan stuff in it as well, which I thought was cool but also weird. And it has really great illustrations, and I just really enjoyed this one a lot. And then we have The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. And this one is a little bit different because the witch elements of this book is actually what ruined it for me. So normally I love witchy books, but I didn't know that this was a witchy book. I thought this was more of like a gothic haunted house type story. And so we have this woman who meets and falls in love with this man and, is whisked away to his house or whatever. But he tells her that there's certain times that she cannot come to the house, especially at night, because it's dangerous. And she's like, well, that's stupid and crazy. I want to be with my husband type thing. But I don't know. I really was loving this one. I thought it was so good, the first 2/3 of the book. And then the last third, it has like some witchy magical elements in it, and I hated it. It ruined the book. I did not like the ending of this book at all. I found it confusing and weird, and there was a twist in the end that I just really didn't like. So, ugh. Bummer. But perhaps you will enjoy it more than me because not everybody feels the same way about certain twists or whatever, so it might work for you. And then we have The Witches of New York by Amy McKay. And this is during the 1800s when people did a lot of seances and spiritualism was a big thing. And so we had these two ladies that ran this little tea shop, and they started kind of a back business that was supposed to help ladies. So they had like different secret ways of curing them and helping them. And so they are in need of a shop girl. And so the ad says, we're in need of a shop girl, but if you're adverse to magic, then you need not apply. So our main character is very intrigued by that ad, and she goes ahead and applies for it and gets the job and is with these two ladies, and different things go down. And then I have a couple that are a little bit more fantasy than horror, but we have The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. And this also takes place during Puritan times, and so our main character is actually half black, half white. And so because of that, people are very suspicious of her and they don't really like her. But, she does the best that she can to be the perfect Puritan woman and goes to church and is very moral and upstanding and does all the things that she's supposed to do. Well, one night she finds herself in the woods, and it's the same woods that apparently the preacher in the town, he killed 4 witches in these woods. And so when she's there, she discovers this old journal of her mother's, and that her mother actually received sanctuary from these witches. And so she's very flabbergasted by this and is shocked to know that her mother would consort with witches. Then we have some other ones that are a little bit more fantasy. I have a bind up of it, and this is by Shay Earnshaw. The first one is Winterwood, the second one is The Wicked Deep. This is a duology about 3 girls who were killed for being witches, and they had stones tied to their ankles and then drowned in the lake. So every summer, for a brief time, the spirit of these 3 witches, they inhabit the hearts of some of the young women in the town, and they use these bodies of these young women to lure boys to their watery death as they drowned them in the same lake that they were drowned in. And then we have The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. And this is about a mother who moves to this lighthouse with her 3 daughters because she's commissioned to draw a mural in this lighthouse. But there's a cave underneath the lighthouse, and her daughters go exploring, and 2 of them ends up missing. And so the people in the town, they start to suspect that some kind of witchcraft was involved because this cave was apparently used to imprison witches. So the town tells them about wildlings, which are supernatural beings that mimic children. So it kind of sounds like changelings to me. I have not read this one yet, but I hear good things about it. There's just too many witchy books. I haven't gotten to them all yet. And then I have a few books by Hester Fox. The first one is The Lullaby of Witches. And this is about a young woman who doesn't really fit in with society or with her family. She's a little bit odd, a little bit strange, goes by her own beat. And so people start to feel like she's a witch because she's so different. And then in modern times, 150 years later, this woman gets a job working at the house where this young girl used to live because it's been turned into a museum. And she starts looking through old records and different things, and she discovers that the family had a young daughter. And nobody really knew this or heard about it because she's been stricken from all the records and kind of hushed up, and nobody wants to talk about her. She's kind of been disinherited by the family. And so this intrigues the woman working at this museum, and she starts doing some digging to find out more about this young girl. And then we have The Widow of Pearl Harbor, and this is about a man who loses his wife, and in order to get away from the memories of her, he moves to Maine to be a minister in this little town. And so in this little town, apparently a lot of bad and creepy and unsettling incidents have been happening that kind of mimic some stories from Edgar Allan Poe. And so this woman named Sophronia Carver, the people in the town blame her, thinking that her and her spinster maid are witches and that they're the ones that are inciting these incidences in the town. And then we have The Witch of Willow Hall, and I haven't read this one yet, and I read the premise and I'm kind of confused, so I don't really know what this is about other than this family has some type of scandal that happens, and so they move away to a different house, and they bring their 3 daughters with them, and then apparently there's something nefarious that's trying to lure away the youngest daughters. That's all I really know about this. And then we have The Remaking by Clem Lloyd Chapman, and this is about a woman living in the 1930s who runs an apothecary, but the people in her city start to think that she's a witch. And so her and her young daughter are both burned at the stake. And so the mom given a pauper's grave or whatever, nothing unusual or spectacular, and kind of forgotten. But her daughter, Jessica, her grave is different. So she's like in a metal box and she's got white crosses that are like built up over the grave in order to contain this little girl. And so the people are like, well, that's weird. Like, if the mom was the witch, then why is the daughter's grave the one that's so like superstitiously buried? So there starts to be some speculation about that. And then in the 90s, they start doing a horror film based on this girl, Jessica, who was supposed to be a witch. And the actor that is playing her starts having some unsettling things happen, and people start to suspect that maybe she is a witch herself. And then we have The Witch in the Well by Camilla Bruce. This is about a woman who was accused of witchcraft because a lot of children went missing and they disappeared around this well. And so when they suspected that she was the one doing it, they drowned her in that same well. And so then years and years and years later, in the modern times, our main character, she starts to write a book about the spirit of this witch that killed these children. Okay, so now I have a couple of middle grade books and then I have some YA books to talk about. So first of all, we have Karen's Witch by Anne M. Martin. So I was a big fan of the Babysitters Club growing up, and this is a spin-off series that's about Karen, who is Christy's stepsister. So I really loved these ones as well in elementary. But anyways, we have Karen, our main character, and she believes that her neighbor is a witch. And so she's doing all that she can to find evidence to support that hypothesis. And then we have The Haunted House by Francine Pascal. And again, I was a big, huge fan of Sweet Valley High books growing up. And so this is when they're younger and they're in elementary. So this is Sweet Valley Twins. So in the town of Sweet Valley, everybody believes that this one house is haunted because they never see the owners come in or out of this house. And so this new girl moves to town and she moves into this house. And Jessica is convinced that she's a witch. But Elizabeth, she kind of befriends her and was like, no, she's not a witch. She's just a lonely, misunderstood girl. So you have to read to find out which one's right. Okay, so now we're going to get into the YA books, starting with Witch by Christopher Pike. And this is about a girl who has witchy powers and she can heal. And she also has the power to look into water, and if sunlight is shining on the water, then she has these visions of the future. And so her mom tells her not to do this, but she looks one day into water and sees this vision, and she sees this boy get murdered. Come to find out that her best friend's new boyfriend is this boy that she saw got killed. And so she develops a crush on him, which is problematic because not only is it her best friend's boyfriend, but she also knows that he's going to be murdered. So she's trying to navigate that. So if you've seen the Netflix series, The Midnight Club, it actually has this aspect in it. And I didn't realize at the time that that's where it came from, is from Witch. Then we have A Wicked Magic by Sasha Lawrence. And this is about two girls that discover a spell one day that could make them witches. So they perform this spell because who doesn't want to be a witch, but without realizing that the magic is wicked. And so every time they use a spell afterwards, something bad happens. And then we have A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. And this is about a girl who goes to a boarding school where there's 5 students that ended up being killed. They call them the Dalloway Five. And these 5 students were said to be witches. And so the spirit of these 5 witchy students haunts the place still. And so our main character, her girlfriend passed away, and so she's just coming back to the school after a year of being away grieving. And so she doesn't want anything to do with the Dalloway Five or the witchy stuff. I'm assuming this has something to do with her girlfriend's death. I haven't read this one yet. But anyway, so she meets this new girl that she kind of develops a crush on, and so she reluctantly helps this girl because she is writing a book about these Dalloway Five. And then we have Spells for Lost Thing by Jenna Welch. And this is about a girl who travels to Salem, Massachusetts with her mom to help clear out her aunt's house who is selling the house. But different weird, mysterious things happen and she starts to suspect that her aunt may be a witch. witch. And then you also have the perspective of Mason, this boy that lives in the town, and he's been in foster care his whole life, and he's trying to track down his mom. And so they get entangled in helping each other and develop a love story. And then we have The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab, and this is actually her debut novel. And this is like The Hacienda, where it's actually about a male witch, which is always intriguing. So this girl who lives in the town of Near, she looks out her window one day and sees this mysterious stranger, this boy that's just standing out there on the moors and seemingly just vanishes into the mist. And so people in the town, they've heard this folk tale about a witch, and so they start to think that this boy that she saw is the witch, especially when children of the town start to disappear. And then we have Mark of the Wicked by Georgia Bowers, and this is about a girl whose mother tells her to use her powers very sparingly, that she should try not to use them. But she's like, heck with that, I'm going to do what I want. And she doesn't want to be a good witch, she wants to be a bad witch that uses her powers for revenge and to gain popularity and all this stuff. But when you use wicked magic, it actually leaves a mark on your face. So she's trying to get around that, but she gets in pretty deep and then realizes, maybe this isn't what I bargained for. Maybe this isn't really what I want to use my powers for. And then last, we have Ecstasia by Claire Legrand. This is the author of Sawkill Girls. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph for you. It says, "All you must know is that today I become one of the 4 saints of Haven. The elders will mark me and place the red hood on my head. They will give me my true name, and with my sisters I will stand against the evil power that lives beneath the Black Mountain, an evil that has already killed 9 of our village's men." So this girl, she also has powers that she doesn't tell anybody about. Well, not really powers, but she can see things that other people don't see. Like she can see really tall, faceless gray women that are as tall as a house, or she can see these creatures with white burning eyes. And so she doesn't tell anybody that she can see these things. Anyways, I haven't read this one yet, and so that's why I want to read it, because the premise was a little bit hard to explain, so I figured it would just be easier just to read it. But it's pretty chunky, but I love the cover, and it sounds mysterious and interesting. I read Small Favors by Erin Craig. I absolutely adored it. And for some reason, I feel like this is going to be similar because it's going to have like a lot of folk horror in it. So I'm very excited. So that's it. That's all the witchy books I have for you. I hope you found some that you haven't heard of, or ones that you wanted to bump up on your TBR perhaps. And I hope you have a witchy good Halloween time. I post every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.